On today's episode of the Stamp Your Mark podcast, I've spoken to Adnan Ebrahim, co-founder of the brand new mental health app, MindLabs. Their mission is to make the world a happier place, and Adnan is a serial entrepreneur. He sold his first business when he was 18. He then sold his next business in his 20s for 7 figures and is now taking on the mindfulness giants like Headspace and Calm. We discussed raising millions in funding. We discussed leadership styles. We discussed working in silence versus building in public. This episode was so much fun to film. So, introducing Adnan Ebrahim.
If you're always looking for more, will you be happy? But I think that there's as with anything, trying to find happiness in a startup environment is always 50 different shades of grey, and there will always be things that you absolutely love doing. And the reality of you have to be doing 100% of what you love all the time is not realistic. I think it's easy to have like that, quote porn on Twitter saying, you need to be absolutely 100% loving what you do every single second of the day. But when you're looking over your VAT return, which you have to do, who's going to find that fun?
Adnan Ebrahim, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. I'm so excited for you to be here. My first question for you is about the top gear for the Facebook generation, Car Throttle. How did that come about?
It came about because I've been messing around online now for a long time. So I started off in my young teens when I was 15, 16. Initially, it was buying and selling wristbands on eBay. So that was how I discovered the world of eBay buying and selling. And then I got scammed on Alibaba, lost a couple of grand, which was myself and my dad's money, my pocket money. And I vowed never to spend money to make money again. It's a kind of stupid thing only a 16-year-old would say. So it led me into the world of blogging and online community building and making. And I had a brand called Blogtrepreneur, which I grew when I was at school. It got acquired just before I turned 18. And then at university, I was that kind of stereotypical car nerd watching Top Gear on a Sunday night, collecting car magazines in my wardrobe. And I just thought, hey, why don't I take what I've learned from the world of community building and blogging and apply it to something that I love, which is cars. And that was how Car Throttle was born.
That's wild. And you say you had an exit by the time you were 18. What did that look like for you at the time?
It wasn't a big exit. I think it was like mid 5 figures, so in like tens of thousands of pounds. But as like a 17-year-old, that was pretty exciting. I was thinking, I've got some university spending money now. But it was weird because I had grown this brand after I came back home from school every day. No one really knew about it, my parents included. So when it came to signing the docs for the company, I had to even get one of them to witness it as a guardian.
Wow. And
they looked at this piece of paper and they were like, what is Blogtrepreneur? What is this website? They had no clue what I was doing. So it came as a bit of a shock to even them that their son was prattling around online and for some reason someone had decided to acquire this brand that he'd built. So yeah, it was a strange genesis.
So you had this whole hidden world of entrepreneurship in your head. And am I right in thinking that a lot of your friends also didn't know?
Yeah.
And that was the same, at uni, I think it was in your second year, you started telling people about Car Throttle at this point.
That's right.
In both times, what was it internally that made you feel like keeping this quiet was, the right and the good thing to do?
I think it was multiple things. I think the first thing was feeling inherently uncool, that I was this blogger by night and, school kid by day. I think also because I was writing a lot of stuff about my learning journey online, I didn't want anyone to see what I was learning. So it was this idea of having this, I guess, almost secret identity. I think today is normal, especially like Web3, metaverse, crypto. It's normal to have this separate identity. And back then I was just thinking, you know what, I want to have this, my own journey, it wasn't really a pseudonym, but yeah, I was probably the fear of being judged was a big driver as to why I didn't, even at university, I didn't kind of tell my flatmates until one day I did. And I said, I've got a secret to tell you. I've got this website. And my flatmate was like, so what? No, he didn't care. And I think then what I realized that it was just stupid. It was kind of just in my head. And that was when I started to be a lot more public about building in the open.
Mm-hmm. So when I was in I think it was first year of Cambridge, I started a blog project on Facebook called Students of Cambridge, which started to get successful. And then we started a Students of Oxford and a Bristol and so on. But at the very start, I just thought, I will forever be the guy behind the scenes. No one will ever know it's me. But my thinking wasn't because in your case, it's not cool to do that. But for me, I just thought, I don't want to have to fail in public. I don't want people to know that I'm trying to build this thing up. That would be embarrassing. That would be hard for me to kind of deal with and justify to people. But then once it picked up and people at, Cambridge specifically started to know what it was, then I was like, okay, actually, why? This is quite cool that I'm actually doing this. And as it started to earn its place within the Cambridge media ecosystem, there was a tab, there was Varsity, there was a Union, and there was Students of Cambridge. Then it became something that I was really proud of. And I was like, boom, yeah, I'm owning this. This is me, really proud of it. So, do you remember any moments of kind of mental transition between don't want to tell anyone to actually, this is cool?
Yeah, funnily enough, I can totally understand that part. But for me, it wasn't the fear of failure as the motivator. It was definitely that feeling of being judged. And the turning point was probably when I started to not care because I had told enough people that I'd gotten over that initial hump. That's when it started to become easier, because by then it still wasn't cool. We still hadn't even shot our first videos. And I remember actually the very first video that I shot, I put on my wall on Facebook, really inviting people to look at it. And at that point we had literally 0 subscribers. It was the first video on the channel. And I really did put myself out there. So I wasn't so concerned with what might happen if it didn't work out at that stage. It was more of a case of, will I be ridiculed? And then once I gotten over that, then I didn't care and I just put myself out there. And then that was the start of me absolutely not caring.
Do you think that holds people back? If we, think about, teenagers now, do you think some of them have kind of entrepreneurial instincts but are held back due to that fear of being ridiculed?
For sure. Yeah. I think there's so much pressure, especially with social, to be seen as the go-getter, to be seen as that person that's got their shit figured out, that I think actually it probably prevents more people from starting today than ever before, because it's very hard to build in secret without anyone knowing what you're up to. Again, like I said, that might be starting to change now with what metaverse, crypto, Web3 allows you to do in terms of identity. But with the fact that we're all glued onto TikTok and Instagram right now means that you really can't not talk about what you're doing. So I imagine, it's a huge blocker to people starting, and that's unfortunate.
One of the things I found funny was on one of your articles for the BBC, the caption read, Adnan turned to blogging about fast cars after losing money to a fake iPod seller online, which I assume is what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I thought, no way, if he managed to get scammed by one of these people, what hope is there for the rest of us?
I was a 16-year-old idiot, so that doesn't really help anyone that much. I mean, all the red flags were there. I was emailing a guy with a Yahoo email address. He asked for money via Western Union. It's all the basic elementary shit that I did. So not many useful tips I can give other than to not be an idiot.
Right. I did think of my mum though when I saw that. Every day, literally, my mum will show me a message from Santander and basically be like, look, and it's at Santander basically saying she needs to change her password.
Yeah.
Every single time I need to tell her, Mother, you don't bank with Santander. You're with NatWest. It's okay. It's fine. But I did see that and thought, oh God, but something that interests me is just the huge success of Car Throttle and, the exit as well. You sold for, it was 7-figure exit, right?
Yeah, I mean, can't go too much into the price of the business because we're under NDAs, but it was a good, successful exit for our investors. But also, I think it was, there's a lot around the journey. We'd been doing it for 10 years. I had really been through a lot of scenarios and situations in that company that were quite transformative. The fact that 3 times we nearly ran out of money, we were, weeks away from being able to make payroll. Not being able to tell anyone about the ups and downs of that. We were still growing a business. It was working well, but as an agency, it became quite difficult to keep expanding that business. We're basically being attacked on all sides. The media landscape over the last 10 years was absolutely savage. So it was a perfect opportunity to sell to a very established and reputable company like Dennis.
And did you raise cash for that business?
Yeah, we did. We raised money from some VCs and some angel investors along the way, but the last round we did was in 2015. So for the next 4 years, we were a profitable, growing business.
Got it. And let's say you're speaking directly now to your 15-year-old self, but in 2022, how would you do it differently?
Well, I guess I'm already incorporating all of that into MindLabs. I think there's a speed with which you can operate as a 15-year-old. There are a lot of things that still hold you back. Whether it's, how to hire people effectively, hiring people that are more senior and experienced than you are, how to get to market faster, test and iterate faster. Really, the biggest thing is speed. And because you have confidence from having done things before, you move a lot faster. So, I mean, the big advice I'd have for a 15-year-old me is to go big faster, go get faster, because most of the time you just limit what you can do based on your own brain and based on what you think is possible. But it turns out you could probably do a lot more than you think you can do.
I like that a lot. And what about the kind of tangibles? If I said, right now, restart it, do you think your mind would go straight into, okay, what's the bigger picture? What are we trying to achieve? Or do you think you'd jump straight into, let me go find a wicked Nissan GTR? And I hope that's a good car. I don't know much about cars.
It is, because I own it. So
that's why I said it. I knew there was a link. But, would you go straight to that car and start creating a TikTok video to a popular TikTok sound? How would you approach it?
If I was wanting to build a car brand today, I think I'd really have to assess a couple of things, right? Like, firstly, where's the attention at these days? You mentioned TikTok. Chances are it is TikTok. I think that's probably where you can still get big audiences, and probably still YouTube. And then the second part is, if I created something today, brand, what am I doing that's different? I think that's the big one. There are so many creators, especially in automotive now, doing a lot of stuff. How can I achieve cut through? How can I cut through the noise? I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it. I'm not sure how I would approach building a new car brand, but I would definitely find where users are spending most of their time and come up with a creative and innovative way of talking to them. Yeah,
that's wicked. Reminds me of when I got sent a car for a week. So still at uni, and somebody reached out from a Bath and they sent me, I think it was a Bath Spider 3.2 something. Do you know the car I'm talking about? Like it's 2-seater, a Bath, roof comes off. It's very cool. It's like a boy toy kind of thing.
So they gave it to you for a loan?
They just sent it to me I was really confused with the whole thing. I was sitting in the English library. Everything was a bit different because I was usually in the geography library. And I was going back and forth on email with this guy. And I was like, yeah, I've got this big audience on YouTube. I think at the time I must have had around 20,000 subscribers. And I was just vlogging about, being a student at Cambridge. And they were like, oh.
So someone from their press team that reached out.
Yeah. So you can't come to the big press
launch
day.
Yeah.
But
we might have met in a previous life if you had been to that launch day, because that was the kind of thing that we would get invited to a lot. And as the team started to grow, they were international launches. We get flown out on the company's private jets to go and drive all these amazing cars and these amazing environments and on test tracks and whatnot. So it definitely was the type of kind of glamour that you would think it was from the outside looking in, but obviously there was the huge business, underwriting all of that, which is, okay, it's all well and good driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis around test tracks, but what's the fundamental business underneath all of this? And I think that's probably where it started to get hard.
That's probably the reason I left YouTube. So there was no, first of all, with that car situation, I was just like, why are you sending me a car? I'm not complaining, but why? Makes no sense. But,
but you'll drive it.
I drove it, took some photos, took some videos, fun times. But then towards the end of that journey for me as a kind of quote unquote, social media influencer, I realized that there was so much more to just creating content. There was this whole business and operation behind the scenes. And I actually enjoyed the business and operation side versus the role that I was playing. And my role at the time was, it was definitely part of me, but it was perhaps 10 to 20% of who I was, which was, hopeless uni student. What do I do next? And looking back on those videos, it's all just proper cringe because like, yeah, bunch of different reasons. But so I liked creating content, but I was much more excited about the kind of brand deals element and the business side of it versus the type of content that I was creating. So I hear what you're saying in terms of people see the outside of it, but there's also like a machine going on the inside. And if that machine isn't properly oiled and taken care of, then everything falls down.
Yeah, and you also have to be thinking about where the future of the business is going as well, because like you, I was also the content creator in the early days of Car Throttle. So I was presenting, also sitting alongside the editor, chopping up the videos, tightening them up, helping on the distribution side. And also like you, I realized I'm not best at that. And we had just hired Alex, who became the kind of face of the Car Throttle brand, and he was amazing at doing that. So I preferred, like you, to be behind the scenes and start thinking about the actual business, and then start to go out to advertisers and brands and start selling what we had built as well. But there's a lot more to a YouTube channel than people think, right? People forget that that's just the facade, and actually behind the scenes, there are all kinds of weird things going on that you also need to do as part of having a YouTube channel.
Yeah, for sure. And just, if we stay on Car Throttle for a little bit longer, this idea of managing people as a young person and consistently, every day or every week facing new challenges which you just don't know how to deal with. Do any experiences or anecdotes pop out in terms of, that was a big one for me at the time?
Yeah, I think in general, managing people that were older than myself. So as a 21-year-old, just raised money, now expected to go and hire a team. I'd never had a job before. I had done internships, but not a proper full-time job. And B, I'd never managed anyone before. So to now go from that to I have to manage a team of multiple people, and then on top of that, they're more experienced than I am. They on CV know what they're up to, was difficult. And that was kind of, imposter syndrome kicking in. And you're constantly thinking, am I even good at this? Am I the right person to do this? Have I got the skill set to do this? And one of the first hires, it's all about hiring the right people, as you know, right? One of the first hires we did make was Alex. And he was a young, hungry automotive journalist that was working at Autocar. And he actually just took the business by the scruff of the neck, particularly when it came to video and content. And he was so good at just coming up with ideas and then getting on and executing them. And those are exactly the type of people you want early on in the business, people that are just go-getters. So I thankfully didn't have to do much traditional management, like development plans, and that sort of stuff came a lot later when we were more mature. And I think in the early days, you want to try and fight off as much process as you can until you really need to, because the early days are you building a product that people want? That's just number one. You have to laser focus on that first and foremost.
So you mentioned imposter syndrome and this idea of having to fend it off on an ongoing basis. Have you come to terms with that now? Do you still get imposter syndrome?
Yes, I think it's now, I would see it as just normal and human. And as I've started to understand it more, it serves me a benefit as well as being kind of there always, which is, are we doing a good enough job? Am I doing a good enough job? Could I be doing better? That can obviously have negative implications because it creates worry. But I've learned to look at the positives of it, which is it always motivates me to want to do better and to do more. And some might say, well, okay, that might not give you much fulfillment. And if you're always looking for more, will you be happy? But I think that there's as with anything, trying to find happiness in a startup environment is always 50 different shades of grey. And there will always be things that you absolutely love doing. And the reality of you have to be doing 100% of what you love all the time is not realistic. I think it's easy to have like that, quote porn on Twitter saying, you need to be absolutely 100% loving what you do every single second of the day. But when you're looking over your VAT return, which you have to do, who's going to find that fun? But it's necessary. So you have to be realistic about these things. And I think with imposter syndrome, I've got better at it. Obviously, having been through some small wins over the last 10 years have helped the imposter syndrome, but it's healthy. It's healthy to challenge yourself. And at the end of the day, it just means that I'm always being retrospective and thinking, did I do the right thing? Am I currently doing the right thing? And then what could I change about what I'm currently doing to make tomorrow better?
Yeah, I really like that. I resonate a lot with the imposter syndrome comments. And so in my case, I got to a place recently where I was like, you know what? There's no imposter syndrome here. I'm good. I know what I've done. I can look at the objectives, and the objectives are that we've built a brilliant team out of thin air. We've never raised cash. We're at, over 1 mil ARR now. And, looking forward, the hopes are really kind of bright. But then, and it was literally today, had a chat with one of our advisors, and they always kind of prompt me to think bigger, to think better, and to push myself. And there was one comment which really just put me back a little bit mentally. And I was like, oh no, there's no way. I kind of just wrote it off straight away. And at the time, the reason I did that was because there are levels to how big you want to go. And when I say something is big, it's big. If I say something is like mental, it's a lot bigger. If I say something is just straight up stupid, then it's like, there's no point even considering it because it's too big. And it was one of those things. I was like, no, that's stupid. But now on reflection, I'm like, I literally just wrote off an idea because I thought it was at a level which I couldn't even get close to. But I haven't actually considered the idea at all. I haven't given it any thought. And because it's slightly different to, what the current plan is, I just wrote it off and thought, no, that's not me. It could never be me. But actually on reflection, it's like, that's imposter syndrome.
I wonder, having heard about that, I wonder whether you wrote it off straight away because you also felt challenged. Maybe it was the fact that someone challenged you to think bigger and you hadn't thought bigger as of yet. And I've had that happen to me in situations before where our investors have said, why are you not moving faster? You need to be moving 10 times faster. And I've used an excuse. Oh, there's a reason why we can't do that because this team has got this much going on and that person has that much going on. And then when I really think about it, it was a response to what I saw was an attack from someone going, you're not doing well enough. Yeah. And actually, objectively, could I have moved faster? Probably. And was I making an excuse? Probably. But was I protecting myself? Maybe I was protecting myself. And that's what is also quite difficult. You really have to separate out the emotion of what's being said and the actual reality of, is what they're saying, does it hold any water? And that's what I've also had to kind of learn over time.
I think that's bang on. I think it was a defense from me. I was like, whoa, I feel challenged. I am challenged. And there have been other parts like that with the same advisor in the past. And then he kind of just watches me just make up excuses. And he just smiles. He's like, okay. And then just silence. And I'm like, oh God, all right, fine. Let's flesh this out a bit. And then eventually I figure out what it is.
I found that actually the role of a founder, CEO, even as an investor as well, you almost play a coach/therapist role in a lot of scenarios. You ask people questions, but most of the time they're just self-reflective questions. And most of the time people do know the answer to their own questions, but they'll come up with reasons as to why it's not the reality. But deep down, most people who are in touch with who they are and what they know underneath do know the real reasons as to why they do what they do. So I found that actually I'm probably less of a, dictator CEO than maybe I used to be. And maybe that wasn't a good thing back then. And I hope that I've learned to become more of a listener CEO, someone that asks the right questions whilst also having opinions. But definitely now as the team started to grow with MindLabs, we're trying to grow this business in a different way, which means that we have to give responsibility over. And that has been hard at times where I'm not used to it. And that's, again, a challenge for myself. How much can I hand the reins back over to people that are more experienced and people that have got expertise? And that is my next that's the next learning that I have to do for myself.
Yeah, I think it's really good to have that level of self-awareness about what your leadership style is, how it's changed, and also what's needed for the business if you want to move at the pace that you do want to move at. I was similar at the start of WOW, so 4 years ago. It just wasn't pleasant to work with. I thought my way was the only way and it had to be like that. And it just wasn't pleasant. And I got feedback from the team. I learned from some of our clients who I did it in a really good way. And then more recently got feedback from our other advisor, Craig Fenton. And he basically said what you've just said there, right? It's about asking the right questions because a lot of the time people have the answers. So then I went full extreme to that way. And then very recently a colleague was asking me something and I was kind of asking questions back. I could see it just got a bit annoying. And I was like, do you want an answer from me? I can give you an answer. I'm trying to help you think, but I can also just give you an answer. And then they were just like, yeah, I'd appreciate an answer. And I was like, cool, do this. So it's like also learning when you need to kind of ask the questions, and also when something is a little bit more time sensitive and urgent and you need to just give the answer. And then
yeah, that goes back to my point around 50 shades of color. There is no definitive right or wrong answer for leadership. You do a bit of this and a bit of that. Sometimes you have to be firm, authoritative, and give an answer because there are people that just need a direction. Other times you let people find that direction themselves, and there's just maybe that's what I've found, having consumed basically the whole of startup Twitter, is there is still no right answer. It doesn't exist. You work to how you are as a person and how your team are as people, and because everyone is different, that means there is no rule book, and you can read like Amp It Up, and you can read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and you can read 0 to 1. They work very well for those people, but they might not necessarily work for you, and that's the learning experience. You have to find what works for you, otherwise you'll always be comparing yourself to someone else.
Yeah, love that. Completely agree with it as well. Tell me about MindLabs.
So MindLabs is a live mental wellness platform. We have a big mission and vision, which is to make the world a happier place by taking care of your mind as normal as going to the gym. And we really believe that we've got to an interesting place when it comes to physical fitness. It's quite normal to say to someone, hey, I'm going to go to the gym tonight, or I've got a personal trainer, or I've got this fitness app that I'm going to do later. But if you still say, oh, I'm going to take care of my mind tonight, it's not quite right. And why is that? We've done so much at destigmatizing mental health, but I still think there's such a long way to go. So our mission was, how can we normalize this even more, but also in a way that's embracing what's about to happen with data and technology. And that's what's really exciting.
I like how even down to the name, there's kind of direction and meaning to what it is. Mm-hmm. Like when I think labs, I think kind of... I think of the labs as in the gym, the labs first of all, and then MindLabs, and just the whole combination together with the branding. It's just a different type of mental health app and community. Was that, I'm assuming it was all intentional?
For sure, yeah, definitely. From the outset, we wanted to be very science focused because our generation is inherently skeptical. So if you have, this 1,000-year-old meditation technique, we need to actually show that it has some scientific benefit. And there are a load of papers now around the fact that 20 minutes of meditation 3 times a week actually changes your prefrontal cortex, and it leads to neuroplasticity happening. And it, in the positive way, it can lead to your brain actually restructuring itself and becoming more relaxed over time because you're strengthening and weakening different neural pathways. So the brand is all around science, very futuristic, and first and foremost, great quality. And that quality is something that we really try to put out in the content that we have on the platform and the classes that we have.
And how does it differ to the big players in the space like Calm and Headspace?
Yes, I mean, those apps, we really respect and love the work that they've done over the last 7 or 8 years at destigmatizing meditation, mindfulness practices. And we would probably look at them as first wave players in this space. As we know, mental health is very nuanced. Everyone has, a different mindset. They have periods of time where they're feeling great and not feeling so great, and different reasons as to why that's happening. We think that, Calms and Headspaces of the world are just scratching the surface of what's possible because they have a very one size fits all experience. If you go on those apps and I go on the apps, they probably serve us the same content. Why is that? Actually, today we have so much more data and biomarker data available to us. So I can say, hey, Joe, you probably didn't have a good night's sleep last night, or your heart rate spiked during the working day. Why don't we serve you with a class that will help you there and then? And that's what we can do today because, hey, 5 years ago, Apple Watches, hadn't caught on. And now more people have fitness trackers. You said you've got a Whoop, Aura Ring, Fitbits. They're everywhere now. And what can you do with that data when it comes to your mind, not just when it comes to your physical fitness? So, we see that as being a big kind of play, especially when it comes to content, live and on-demand video classes, where you can form that relationship with an instructor. We have 17 instructors on the platform now, and the community, right? Like when you're doing these activities with other people, suddenly you feel like you're less alone. There are other people that have the same problems that you do as well. And again, those apps, maybe because they're in that V1 stage, they're more about you doing that practice on your own. So I think, there are multiple areas for us to kind of expand into. And that today is why users love us, is because we offer something different.
I think that's a brilliant answer, first of all, to a question about competitors. But secondly, two things jump out. So one is the actual data that you're able to collect. Whoop is my baby. I love it. And when I wake up in the morning and I feel a bit groggy, I'm almost, quite curious. It's the first thing I do. I check my Whoop to see what my sleep score was. And then on the flip side, when I've had a really good wake up and I feel refreshed, I'm really excited to be like, come on, I got at least 7 hours sleep. I can feel it. I know it. And then I see it and I'm like, yes, that was right. Mm-hmm. So that's one part, which I can definitely see being, huge and really valuable, especially when you then link it to a specific class based on your need. Mm-hmm. The other point is the wider piece on community. Again, if I look at Whoop, when I first got it, I was really excited about it. Now I've got a group with Josh and Joel, and I can see that, a few days ago I was third on everything. I wasn't very happy about that. And now I'm second. So that community feel and bringing others in, I also think is wicked, not just as a USP, but also for retention going down the line.
And there are probably different reasons as to why we would have community in MindLabs, because chances are you probably don't want to compare your mental health score with anyone else, because it will probably make you feel more anxious. But there are other positive effects of community, like, sharing what worked for you and what didn't work for you, having a support group around you, having that, positive uplift when you're doing a class with someone. It's actually very similar to, going to the gym and actually going to one of these mindful studios and having a yoga class or a mindfulness class in real life. How do we bring that experience into the digital world? And that's what we're trying to do.
I was really impressed by the app when I first saw it, by the video content, by the actual, coaches. How do you refer to them?
Instructors, but coaches, yeah. By
the actual instructors, it was all seriously good, especially considering the app, it's Wednesday today. The app launched
last week.
Yeah. So, that's, first of all, it's really cool, but how did you get it to that level of quality, that level of thinking in terms of what you wanted and what good looked like so quickly?
Yeah, we were, so prior to having raised any money, and I'll get onto that, myself and Gabs, my co-founder, we wanted to build a prototype, basically. We wanted to actually see for ourselves whether this would work. So in a really hacky way, we got some kind of brain measurement devices. We shot our first video in a studio, super hacky. And we got some people in to our makeshift office, and we sat them down in front of this 10-minute class, and we put the band on them, and we saw what happened to their brain as they actually did those classes. And every single person saw this huge drop in their activity levels in the brain, and they became more relaxed as they started to watch this class. And that was when we realized, okay, there's something there. And after that, we were lucky because we raised money for Car Throttle. There were investors that loved working with us. And we went back to them, and, a good half of them instantly said, we're going to back you again. So it was really nice to have, that validation already from investors that had a great journey with us, with Car Throttle. So yeah, we raised money and started to build the team. And that was how, with the team, they really, spent a lot of time on crafting that product last year.
That's brilliant. And in terms of funding, so you had a $1.4 million pre-seed, and then it is a $3.5 million seed.
Yeah,
is that correct?
£1.4 million pre-seed, and then $3.5 million seed. And yeah, we managed to raise from some really great investors. Too many to list, but the likes of Passion Capital and Seed Camp, who backed us early on. Then Pro Founders Capital and Slack, which was amazing for us because we're big users of Slack. I'm sure your team is as well. And to have a brand like that believing in the future of employee wellness, and with the ability, to introduce us to more people in the States, which is going to be our biggest market, was amazing. So, and on top of that, loads of angel investors, tech founders. So, we've had some awesome support so far. But now, you never win once you've raised the money. The money allows you to go and build the business. So we're really laser focused now on, building out the product and trying to get more people to use it.
So for a lot of our listeners, they'll be familiar with terms like pre-seed, seed, and so on, they understand the importance of raising cash. But, let's talk directly to the people who have never heard of, fundraising at all with regards to building a big business. Mm-hmm. Can you explain why you've raised funds, how much more money you're going to need to raise, and what you hope to achieve with that?
Yeah, sure. So, it always, even my parents struggled with this. They were like, why do you need to raise millions and millions of pounds? Just go and build first. The general premise is that you fund losses during a period of high growth. So I start MindLabs today, but in order to build a great experience, and thank you for saying that you've enjoyed using it so far, you need to have people that are going to build the app, that are going to code the back end, that are going to shoot the classes, that are going to instruct the classes. And to do that without raising any money means that you're probably going to have to move at a snail's pace. You're going to have to start selling things and making money from day one. That's the traditional way, and that's great. And we did that for the very first couple of years at Car Throttle before we raised money as well. But if you want to grow and take the market very quickly, and in a very competitive market like digital health, raising money allows you to essentially fund your losses for a certain period of time. Those losses will mostly be staff. So you can basically say, hey, I can hire a team really quickly. We can build product really quickly. We can get to market really quickly, far quicker than if we didn't raise money. And because of that, actually our growth rate is going to be super, super high. And it means that we're going to make money faster at some point. So at some point you start to move into profit making territory again, but your growth rate is now that versus that. Mm-hmm. So you're going a lot faster. How much more money would need to raise? Look, we see this as a big global opportunity to be the leading mental health brand. To do that, how do we get and find and reach all of those potential users? How do we build the best products? All the data stuff I spoke about means that we will for sure need to raise more money. But I think that's an accepted part of the strategy, an accepted part of the mission that we're on, which is we want to be the best and to get to, technically every single person in the world that at some point doesn't feel too hot does require money. Yeah.
Brilliant. Great explanation. So I'm thinking back to what we said earlier about, the fight against certain stigma with regards to mental health. And then I think back to when I've said in front of family members that I go to therapy. And it wasn't hey guys, just to let you know I go to therapy. It was, no, I can't because, on Thursdays I have therapy. And then straight on to the next conversation. Bro, they looked at, one person I won't say who they looked at me like I just said that I killed someone.
Yeah.
And it was just such shock and they didn't know how to act. And it was clearly something that they hadn't heard said in a casual way before.
Yeah.
And then they kind of gave me a couple of looks and then they just turned around and walked away until I kind of spoke to them about it again.
Yeah, I think a big part of, you're talking about your history with university magazine and digital communities. If you remember back in the day what those university digital communities looked like, it was still very much kind of laddish culture. And we're slowly changing now, but we can always blame it on our parents' generation not understanding therapy. But even in our generation, if we look at our generation, if you, like you said, I'm not sure who that person was, but it could have been someone our age that looked at you strangely and thought, you go to therapy? So when I first started going to therapy in 2016, 2017, I also really didn't tell many people because, again, it was stigma. It was, you must be pretty messed up if you're going to therapy. But actually flip it on its head. All I'm doing is basically paying someone to listen to me for an hour. I can be talking about anything. Most of the time I just talk about absolute nonsense. Yeah. And the fact is there's someone there that's just willing to listen, that's completely impartial, that might get you to challenge yourself as to why you thought a certain way. So it's very much like having this mental personal trainer. So if you have a personal trainer, or you've probably been to a gym class, why wouldn't you have one for your mind, which is technically even more important than your body? So I think it is changing. And the idea with MindLabs is, we don't replace therapy or, going to see a psychiatrist, but we make it easier for people to start understanding their mind. So it's very much, top of the funnel. You're wanting to optimize your mental health, or you're wanting to optimize, your energy levels in the morning. But as you start to use the product more, we can start to unlock certain ways of thinking that you might have about your mind, and then hopefully carry on destigmatizing therapy and seeking out professional help.
But yeah, for sure, I can see that things are changing, but also as individuals, as young people as well, we can actually do more to shift those perceptions too. I want to talk about personal brand, because on the one hand, you say when you started ventures in the past, you were quite silent. Whereas now, you know, if you look on your LinkedIn, you're already active. There's good content going up. You're building in public. You know, you were named Forbes 30 under 30. You received a ton of press. So what is your view on just that, personal branding and building in public?
I'm a big believer in it. I think, you know, historically at Car Throttle, I was more active actually in front of the camera, being the face of the community, you know, active on Instagram, social media. It's really important, I think, to have a public voice as the leader of a company, or even if you're not the leader of the company, just to have a public voice about what you stand for, what you believe in, what you do, what you're working on, opens up so many doors. And I think that's probably the thing that people underestimate about building a personal brand. They think it's all about LinkedIn wank and talking about yourself in the best way possible. And of course, people do want to share in your success. So you do have to, you know, tell people when you're winning. But I think the most important thing actually that you can gain out of it is the unexpected opportunities that come your way because you've just spoken about what you're doing. So you don't even have to self-promote. The fact that you're just out there talking about the ups and the downs means that you get opportunities like you just would never have imagined. And I can count so many times investors that have inbounded us because they've seen a post, customers that have inbounded or downloaded the app because they've seen a post, you know, people that we've hired because they've seen a talk that I did. That's happened so many times. So yeah, it's just about getting yourself out there because, you know, there's not much downside really aside from some of your time.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. So Ali Abdal, who was also on this podcast recently, one of the things he talks about is, you know, creating more surface area digitally for people to find you and for, quote, lucky events to happen. I think he actually paraphrased a quote from somebody else, but that's what it is. The more of yourself you can put out into the world, the more of those bits of area that you allow people to land on and find you, they then gravitate towards you. And they could be customers, they could be investors and so on. So I think that's wicked. So I want to talk about community with somebody who has built a ton of online communities before. And I commented on a LinkedIn post earlier this morning. There was a post about the metaverse. The author, who was, by the way, a LinkedIn top voice, was encouraging people to share their thoughts on the metaverse. Their argument was that, you know, it's never going to happen. And I commented and I said, actually, you know, the fact that you are sharing this with these little avatars and profile pictures on LinkedIn. We're in the metaverse
already.
Exactly. That was my argument. I said, we're already part of the way there, like you are and we are. And I think that was, you know, a decent response. And I wanted to hear her thoughts on it. I was shocked when I saw her response. I could not believe it. I was screaming. She jumped in and said, ha, 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 ha. And then just absolutely slated me, not for my argument, but for the fact that I just am stupid, basically. That was what she was saying. And then she ended it by saying, amazing suggestion, Joe, keep up the great work.
Sarcastically.
Okay. And I just thought, how are you going to be out here?
Maybe that's why she's a top voice, because her engagement rates probably fired you up to keep commenting on her stuff.
Maybe that's what it is. I could not believe it. You know, how can you encourage people to, you know, join your community and converse with you online, share ideas, and then slate someone just for the fact that they've shared a view which you've asked them to do? There was no intellectual sparring there whatsoever. It was a ha 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 ha, you're an idiot, basically. So that, in my view, is how it's not done. I would love to hear your view on how it is done.
I think the fundamentals of what is a community, they have a shared set of values. A community can carry on its discourse without the moderator needing to be there, so it's self-sufficient. And it exists in a place that the community can find, and it's easy to find. And really, the shared set of values is the first thing I would always tackle, which is, what does this community stand for? What does it believe in? What do you want this community to believe in? And do the community members share your same schools of thought? If they do, that's basically half the battle, because all you're doing is finding like-minded people. And by the way, that doesn't mean that like-minded is they all agree with your thoughts. It means they're like-minded in wanting to discuss the metaverse. That is the community of people that are either in or out of the metaverse, but they're talking about the metaverse. And then also you have to provide a safe space. That's probably what that author hasn't done quite well, which is you're probably disincentivized now to engage with the community unless you really like the banter. because you're feeling that it's not safe. You might get slated again. And a community needs to have kind of safety for it to thrive and for it to flourish. And, there's so many times at Car Throttle now with MindLabs, we started to grow on Instagram. And the idea actually was just to provide a page that was motivational. So there's a lot of motivational quotes. There were a lot of things you can do to help your morning wake up routine or to help you sleep. A lot of that actually informed the content that we were shooting and creating. But the fundamentals were the community was around optimizers, people that wanted to feel better. The safe space was on Instagram. And we interacted with them because we were part of their community and we were the same type of, we had the same rationale and the same mentality. So yeah, I think those three things are what makes a good community.
I think that's a really great answer. The part that I really like is that you know where the community exists, you know where to find it. Mm-hmm. For some reason, that took me to Friends, the TV show, being in Central Park Cafe. And I just thought, wow, like that's when you're there, you get it, the like-minded people are around. That's where you feel safe, which leads on to the other point on safety. So I think that's a great answer. So I understand that you're an angel investor. How would you kind of summarize yourself and your angel investing activities?
Right now, I haven't done a great deal. I've done 4 or 5. I just look for crazy, motivated founders tackling big problems. That's basically the one sentence elevator pitch. And I don't care what their backgrounds are. All I care about is that they have drive and hustle and they can see something in this market that no one else can. Because I think, not having done many of them, but knowing a lot of other startup founders, the ones that do well are just the ones that have raw persistence. They might not have, the most intellectual brain power in the world, but they can get shit done continuously over a long period of time. So I look for the same thing and would love to keep trying to find those who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world.
I love that. Especially the point on intellectual brain power. Like, I see with people that I went to school with, people who perhaps weren't so intellectual and don't describe themselves to be super intellectual, but you just know they are going to absolutely smash it because they want to absolutely smash it, and they want it to an extent of working with them, working like on themselves, being honest with themselves, being self-aware, identifying the roadblocks that are essentially keeping them from getting where they really want to get to. And there's just this kind of relentless pursuit of that goal. Doesn't matter how clever they are, doesn't matter what sets they were in at school, what grades they got. That's another story. This is like a new level playing field. So I really like the distinction between people who are essentially naturally smart and people who just want it. So I like that you invest in that way. That's quite cool. This show is called the Stamp Your Mark podcast. So something that I try to ask every guest is about the mark that they want to leave on the world. What is the mark?
I actually think my personal mark is exactly the same as the mark that MindLabs wants to have on the world, which is to make the world a happier place. I'm personally driven by helping billions of people to be happier. If you ask me why I have that, I think it's a kind of personal goal that I've always had from the Car Throttle era, but I think it's probably driven by my legacy, what I want to leave behind when all is said and done. And I would love for people to say that, other people were happier as a result of what he built. And that for me gives me an immense amount of satisfaction. So yeah, making the world a happier place is how I want to stamp my mark.
We'll end there. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Joe. Enjoyed it.